Quick question. Why do you exist? Not in some deep philosophical meaning of life way. I mean biologically, mechanically. Why did it take two people to make you? Why didn't your mom just clone herself? Why didn't nature say, single-parent households are easier, let's skip this whole two genders thing and have everyone reproduce on their own? Because here's the thing. For most of life's history on Earth, that's exactly what happened. Bacteria don't need a partner. They just split. One becomes two. Done. No dating apps, no awkward first dates, no, we need to talk conversations. So somewhere along the way, nature looked at this perfectly simple system and decided to make it complicated. And today, we're going to find out why. Let's start with something you've definitely experienced. You're in an office. Someone needs 100 copies of a document. Easy. Pop it in the copier. Hit 100. Done. But here's the catch with photocopiers. Every copy is made from the previous copy, not the original. So copy number 1 is perfect. Copy number 2 has a tiny smudge. Copy number 3, the smudge gets bigger. By copy 50, the page looks like it survived a war. The text is blurry, there's a stain that wasn't there before, maybe a corner is missing entirely. This is called copy of a copy degradation. Here's the wild part. This is exactly what happens when an organism clones itself. When a single-parent organism reproduces, let's call it Bob the bacteria, Bob doesn't make a new version of himself. Bob makes a photocopy. And every time Bob's descendants copy themselves, tiny errors creep in. Scientists call these mutations. Most are harmless, but some are like that smudge, and they accumulate. Generation after generation, the smudges pile up. This is called Muller's ratchet, named after the geneticist Hermann Muller, who figured out that for organisms that only clone themselves, genetic errors can only build up. They can't be erased. It's a one-way ratchet, clicking in only one direction toward decay. Think of it like a video re-recorded over and over on old VHS tapes. The original looks great. Record that recording, it's slightly worse. Record that one, worse still. After enough generations, you're watching static with a vague shadow of what used to be a movie. So if you're a species that only clones itself, you are, generation by generation, recording over a recording of a recording. And that's a problem nature needed to solve. So how do you fix the photocopier problem? Here's an idea. Instead of copying one document, what if you had two slightly different copies, and you mixed the good parts of both together to make a new, better copy? That's basically sex. Imagine two decks of cards. Deck A has some cards in great condition. Deck B has different cards in great condition, but some of Deck A's cards are damaged. If you took the best cards from each deck and combined them into one deck, you'd end up with a deck better than either original. This is essentially what happens when two organisms combine their genetic material. The good genes from parent A cover for the damaged genes from parent B, and vice versa. It's called genetic recombination, and it's nature's way of hitting a shuffle and repair button every single generation. Suddenly, the photocopier problem disappears. Instead of inheriting one parent's accumulated smudges, you get a fresh shuffle, a new combination that might dodge most of those smudges entirely. This is reason number 1 why sexual reproduction, and therefore two types of reproductive cells like sperm and egg, or pollen and ovule, exists. It's a built-in repair and refresh mechanism. But here's the question that follows immediately. Okay, but why two genders specifically? Why not 3, or 5, or 50? Why did nature settle on exactly 2? Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine you're planning a group project with 2 people. Coordination is simple. You call each other, split the work, done. Now imagine that same group project with 50 people. Now you need meetings, subgroups, someone to organize who talks to whom. It becomes a logistical nightmare. Reproduction works the same way. If you have only one type of reproductive cell, like in cloning, there's no coordination problem, but you get the photocopier issue we just talked about. If you have 3 or more types of reproductive cells, and yes, this actually exists in some fungi and slime molds, where there can be hundreds of mating types, you run into a different problem. Mitochondrial conflict. Here's something most people don't know. When a sperm and egg combine, the egg provides almost all of the cellular power plants, called mitochondria. The sperm's mitochondria basically get destroyed or excluded. This isn't random. It's actually a peace treaty. Imagine if both parents' mitochondria were allowed into the offspring's cells. You'd have 2 different sets of power plants, each with its own genetic instructions, competing for resources inside the same cell. It's like having 2 different electrical companies trying to wire the same house at the same time, each with different blueprints, both trying to take charge. Chaos, conflict, cellular civil war. So nature's solution was brutally elegant. Only one parent's mitochondria gets to come to the party. This created an evolutionary pressure. Cells split into 2 strategies. Strategy A, make your reproductive cells small, mobile, numerous, and don't contribute mitochondria. Sperm, essentially, minimal cargo, maximum mobility, like a delivery driver on a motorcycle, traveling light and fast. Strategy B, make your reproductive cells large and resource-packed, with all the mitochondrial infrastructure needed to build a new organism. Eggs, like a fully loaded moving truck, carrying everything needed to set up a new household. Once these 2 strategies emerged, a third strategy, medium-sized cells in between became disadvantageous. Why? Because medium-sized cells are the worst of both worlds. Not fast enough to find a partner quickly, and not resource-rich enough to support offspring alone. It's like trying to compete in a race where some people built motorcycles and others built moving trucks, and you showed up with a moped that's too slow to race and too small to carry cargo. You lose either way. So evolution didn't choose two genders arbitrarily. It's the mathematically stable outcome of solving the mitochondrial conflict problem. 2 is the number where the system is stable. One type goes small and fast, the other goes big and resourced, and that's the equilibrium that sticks. Now here's where it gets genuinely fascinating, and a little terrifying. There's a famous theory in evolutionary biology called the Red Queen hypothesis. It's named after the Red Queen in Through the Looking Glass, the Alice in Wonderland sequel, who famously says it takes all the running you can do just to stay in the same place. Here's what this means biologically. You, and every living thing, are constantly under attack. Not by lions or tigers, well, sometimes. I'm talking about something much smaller and much more relentless. Pathogens, viruses, bacteria, parasites. These tiny invaders evolve incredibly fast. A virus can mutate and produce a new generation in hours. You take about 20 to 25 years to produce a new generation. So if pathogens evolve at cheetah speed and you evolve at snail speed, how do you not get wiped out? Answer: you change the lock, not the speed of making new locks. Imagine your immune system is a lock on your front door. If you clone yourself, every house, every individual has the exact same lock. Once a burglar, a virus, figures out how to pick one lock, it can open every door in the neighborhood. Instantly. Game over for everyone. But if every individual has a slightly different lock, because their genes are a unique shuffle from two parents, remember our card decks, then a virus that learns to pick your lock can't open your neighbor's door. The population doesn't get wiped out all at once. The diversity acts like a firewall. This is the big reason scientists believe sexual reproduction exists at all. Not really about repairing genetic smudges, that's a bonus, but about constantly shuffling the genetic lock so pathogens can never get good enough at picking them. It's an eternal arms race. Your immune system genes, specifically a group called the MHC genes, are some of the most diverse genes in the entire human genome. And fun fact, this is also why, on a subconscious level, humans and many animals are attracted to partners whose immune system genes are different from their own. Some studies suggest people can unconsciously smell genetic compatibility. Different MHC genes smell more attractive to us. Your nose might be doing evolutionary biology without asking your permission. So let's recap because we've covered a lot. Why two genders, and not one? Cloning. Because cloning is a photocopier with no undo button. Errors only accumulate, and eventually the recording degrades beyond repair. Sexual reproduction lets organisms shuffle the deck every generation, mixing good genes from two sources to repair and refresh. Why two genders, and not 3 or more? Because of the mitochondrial conflict problem. Once reproductive cells split into small and fast versus large and resource strategies, any in-between strategy becomes evolutionarily disadvantaged. 2 becomes the stable number, like how a tug of war needs exactly 2 sides to make sense. 3 sides pulling on a rope just creates a tangled mess. Why does this system persist despite being way more complicated than cloning? The Red Queen hypothesis. It's an eternal arms race against pathogens. Genetic diversity, which requires 2 different genetic contributions, is like constantly changing the locks on your house so the burglars, viruses, and bacteria can never get comfortable. So here's the big mind bender to leave you with. The reason you have a mom and a dad, the reason romance, dating, relationships, and honestly half of all human art, music, and drama exists, traces back to a microscopic war that's been raging for over 1 billion years between living cells and the invisible things trying to eat them from the inside.